I'm so excited to be here with my friend Dee Dee and have a conversation about really both of our recovery and how we helped each other recover, but also explicitly what you went through to heal and recover from some really extreme addictions that you struggled with in your late teens. And I do want to say Denise has been clean and sober for 39 years, she told me today. And, that's covering a lot of ground. And it's amazing. So that's what we're going to talk about. And I just wanted to start with asking you some questions about, you said you really got involved using alcohol and drugs in a dangerous way when you were about 15. But, as I've talked about in my in previous podcasts, I always say addiction or connection. So if you lose connection with yourself or have an inability to connect with people outside of you, that pain is so immense that you're going to have some way to medicate that. So what happened to you during your life, but especially at 15, that caused you to lose track of yourself and not be able to really be here in the world as Dee Dee?
Well, it's for me, I lost connection or began losing it very young. Mm-hmm. Just being in a home where I had felt that I had to constantly try to get love and approval, and then also being brought up religiously and thinking that way about God and Jesus in my case, of that I had to prove I was good enough or try to always become good enough to be loved and accepted. And I had a father who was abusive and critical, and I was afraid to be myself.
Yeah. That's dangerous. I had a father like that too. And it seems with people that are hurt the way he was hurt or the way my dad was hurt, they just look for your flaws and attack you viciously. And pretty soon you start having that feeling like there's nothing about me that's lovable. There's nothing I can do to earn this person's love.
Yeah.
And again, so you're get in this mode where you're trying and trying and trying to be good enough, but you never feel like you get there.
Yes.
So what happened at 15 that caused you to finally give up on yourself and decide, there's no hope for me?
I had a series of events happen one night where I had started drinking and partying with my older sister, and we were at a bar on Aurora, and it had closed down, and it started snowing outside. And
I'm assuming you had a fake ID at
the
15.
owner of the bar didn't require ID.
Okay.
So everybody left. My boyfriend at the time was taking people home and left me there with the owner of the bar. And he tried kissing me and more than that. And I ran away from him out onto the street. And I flagged a car down to take me home. And it was a car full of like older teens, young, maybe early 20s, I don't know. Anyway, they said they would take me home. And when they got me to my house, they wouldn't let me out of the car until I let them all kiss me or do whatever they wanted. And then I crawled in my sister's window and went into my room to go to sleep. And I woke up a little while later and was somebody on top of me, and I got raped. And so it was like not just one of those things, but all of those things afterwards that made me just make the decision that I was bad, that all of that was my fault, and I was, there's no way I could ever dig my way out of that to be worthy of God or love or anything. And I just made the decision that I was bad and I couldn't do whatever I want. And that's what began more serious drinking and drugging and being promiscuous and stealing and lying and just everything that goes with like kind of that life.
So at that moment, it sounds like an unbelievably horrible evening. I mean, rape after assault after, inappropriate behavior, finally culminating in someone on top of you in the middle of the night. You decided, I'm a bad person, I'm not redeemable, what's the point of trying? And I think when you hit that point of saying, what's the point of trying, is when, who cares, I'm in horrible pain and I'm going to do anything I can do to mitigate that pain. I don't care what it is. I'll sleep with anyone, I'll take any drug, I'll drink as much as possible. I'm just trying to survive.
Yep.
Yeah. That's a really tough story. So what was the turning point for you when you finally decided, no, I am going to live, I am going to try? What brought you to that place?
There's a number of points, and one of them was when I started freebasing coke. I went from thinking that I was having fun and partying and living the good life, and the minute I freebased it, I changed. My mentality, my brain, something switched. And the first thought after taking the first hit for me was, that person's getting more than me. And then it became not fun. It was constantly trying to get my share. And so it was, I didn't think about it like this at the time, but it went way more out of my control. And I found myself in situations that scared me. Like I had one night where I started freebasing with friends, with a friend and her boyfriend, and he brought somebody along, and the last thing I know, I'm in a car, driving a car with people getting high, and the next thing I know in the morning, a maid is opening the door of a motel room on Aurora, and I hear cars whizzing by, and I'm naked on this bed with a complete stranger, and I did not know what had happened and where I was, and that terrified me. And I also I didn't stop at that point. And not very much longer, I think a few months later, I got pregnant. And even though I wasn't trying to be a good Christian girl anymore, I wanted to be able to give the child up for an adoption, because to me, abortion at that time was not okay. And so it was the first time I needed to stop drinking and using to be able to do that. And I couldn't. And that also scared me.
Yeah. So you tried, and this was something that you really believed in, and you were not able to stop using. And I know you. You were a person of integrity. You were an incredibly generous person. So you find yourself not even being able to recognize who you are anymore.
Right.
And that must have been absolutely terrifying. And also being in circumstances that terrified you. So when you finally realized, I don't want to live my life this way, I'm doing things that I don't recognize as myself, I'm walking around afraid, and I'm not feeling any joy in my life, what was one of the first things that you did what was one of the first steps you did to start to change?
When I was 17, I told my mom that I was suicidal, and specifically I had visions of driving off a cliff. I had a fast car, and she got me a therapist, like right away. And for me to even tell her that when I was such a caretaker of my mom specifically
Right.
was miraculous. And
Yeah. Like there's that moment of courage, which I think recovery requires, is like you see that thing, it seems insurmountable, and you do it anyway.
right.
So you got into therapy even though you were still using.
Yeah.
Talk about that a little bit. Like how was
Yeah.
that helpful?
So for me, it was life-changing because I had somebody who listened to me and who didn't judge me. I still tried to please her. I remember going to confession growing up and making up sins with the priest because I didn't want to tell him my really bad things. You know, I was a
Right.
little kid, like, what did I really do? But I did the same thing with the therapist where I still tried to get her approval, but it started the process of figuring out how to trust and how to show up anyway to save myself. So
So even though you were still using, you started telling the truth. You
Yes.
stopped making up sins. You shared what was actually going on in your life. And even though you weren't able at that point to change, you started to be seen. You realized I can tell the truth and not be totally rejected and abandoned.
Yes.
So that was a big turning
Yeah.
point.
And
Yeah.
I did not tell the whole truth. I told as much of it as I could. And that was a start.
Yeah.
That's what I needed to do.
Right.
Yeah.
And someone looked in your eyes and listened and expressed caring, probably for the first time in your life, which is just, that's stunning and so necessary to recovery.
For the first time, for being me. Because I did experience being cared about in my family, but it was for doing the dishes or cleaning something or doing something for you.
Right.
You know, you're such a good girl. I got that. But
Yeah.
this felt like a deeper
Yeah.
sense of approval or
Yeah.
being seen, I guess.
I love that story about, you were trying to get approval by doing things, and it's funny to me that you walked in my house today and emptied my dishwasher. But I think that's actually part of your personality, but it's also still there a little bit, the remnants of
Yeah.
the, caregiving that you were using to get your needs met or to get seen. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I loved you emptying my dishwasher. Thank
You're
you
welcome.
so much. Yeah. So you had the help from the therapist, and that was a big, big starting point for you. What was the second thing that helped you move towards, really committing to recovery?
The next thing was that my sister, who's a year older than me, was in her addiction and was more advanced in her disease than I was, and was acting out differently. And our family, my mom and her brother, who was in recovery, did a intervention, and they included me in that,
Right.
which terrified me because I felt like a hypocrite, because I also thought that she would bust me and say, "You're just as bad as me, what are you talking about?" And she didn't do that. She was admitted into a treatment program, and I went to see her, and she asked if I would talk to somebody at the treatment program, and I said I would, and they did a assessment, and they told me that I was an alcoholic and an addict, and they gave me the impression that I was not going to do very well if I continued on. And that was another example, or a time when I was able to be really honest. And it almost was a relief to have somebody ask me about that.
Yes.
I never talked to my therapist about that.
Wow. So just the actual tell me the details
Yes.
of what you are doing opened up something
Yes.
that was really important to say.
Yes. And it also felt like a relief when I was told that I was an alcoholic.
Yeah.
And that same night, my uncle took me to my first AA meeting. And it was at the Fremont Fellowship, and it was a 9:30 candlelight meeting, and I always remember it. And it did feel like church a little bit to me because of that. And it just was another place where I started to feel like, well, maybe I belong in this group with these people. And
yeah. So it sounds like AA turned into a refuge for you. Talk a little bit more about that.
yeah, I told you before, it was I went in there feeling how I felt, like a piece of crap, like I was bad. But I experienced kindness, generosity. I was being told that I was wanted, that I belonged, and it was saved my life. It was.
I can see the
what
look
kept me
in your
there.
eye. I can hear it in your voice. Like maybe one of the first times where you felt fully accepted because you weren't, talking to your therapist was great, but you were actually sharing the details of the things that you thought were hideous and bad about you.
Yeah.
Like literally disgusting. And people were looking you in the eye and saying, we want you, we love you.
I'm that way too. I've
Yeah.
done that too.
Yeah.
I didn't start out sharing those kinds of things, but I was hearing people talk about what I had done and what I had felt like.
What they had done, and you could relate. Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing. So glad that you found that venue.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that was the beginning of your recovery. And I think you told me you literally went to meetings every day.
I went to multiple meetings a day. My life revolved around my recovery. And I moved in with a woman that lived within walking distance from Fremont, and so I would go to Fremont all the time, even though it was in one way the opposite of what I would have thought I needed, because it's just hardcore, like just intensely hurt people and really harsh, and it terrified me, but I also felt really safe. So it was just very it was where I needed to start out, because it's where I identified myself.
Really interesting combination of loving and also like had walked such a hard road in their life, and it sounds like a lot older than you.
Yeah, I was pretty young. There was a point at about 6 months of being in recovery and talking to my sponsor and just saying, based on what I'm hearing, I could use and go out and drink for a number of years and then come back. And just, why am I doing it so young? And she's like, yeah, you can. Go ahead. You want to do that? And when she said that, I was so hurt and angry that she would say that to me, like, don't you even care? But what it did was put that choice right in my face. Like, yeah, you're going to do that? No, you're not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You want to lose another 20 years of your life? Yeah, you can probably survive it, but that's 20 years you'll never get back.
Yep.
Yeah. So the thing she said that made you angry was actually something really important to you.
Yep.
Yeah. So were there any techniques or tools that you found particularly helpful in your recovery process?
There's a few things. There's a lot of things. I continued with therapy, which I had to do. Have that place to process, because that's not what you do in AA or where I went to AA. And I just followed every suggestion that was given me. I went to multiple meetings. I got a sponsor. I did service work from emptying ashtrays to, I was a treasury of a meeting. I worked the steps. I read the literature. And then I reached out to people.
Yeah.
which was the hardest part, but
Right.
also very important. And then I continued doing the kinds of things that the ways that I was coping before I got in the program, which was being promiscuous and being irresponsible with money, just
Caretaking, I think,
Yeah.
ever since I've known
Oh,
you,
yeah.
that's been a really big thing is, when you're hurting, you actually go and take care of other people.
Right. And I always
And-
forget that one.
Yeah. And
Interestingly
it's
enough.
just, it's this thing, like something that's so lovable about you, but at the same time, I always call that an overdone strength.
Right.
Like, yeah, it's great that you're giving and
Right.
loving, but when you do that to ignore what's going on inside of you,
Right.
then it becomes a distraction. And yeah, another piece of the healing is trying to get that to a place where it's healthy and you're not just, avoiding yourself.
Right.
Yeah. So a big part of my recovery is my connection with you. And I will never forget our first time we met. But I'd like you to share a little bit about what that was like for you.
Yeah. The first time we met was in a group therapy weekend workshop thing. And I just recognized myself in you. I felt immediately drawn to you. And I think it was seeing your courage and your honesty. And I just feel moved talking about it because it's a miracle to me to have allowed somebody like you close to me, or to want you to be close to me, when I was so scared. So
I feel so touched when you say that you saw my courage, because I think at that point I couldn't see it. But I did see you. I looked across the room and I was like, that's my friend. That's the person I want to know. And I remember that so clearly because I think that was the first time in my life that I saw someone, I just went, I want to know her. I want to be friends with her. And I went over and I talked to you and I said, let's get together. Let's go on a date, and I was so proud of myself for doing that. And it was the beginning of the most incredible friendship. I am so thankful
yeah,
that I did that. Yeah.
I am too. And there's just so many levels of ways that you helped me in my healing. And our first date was to go to the movie A River Runs Through It with Brad Pitt. And
Yeah.
that's still one of my very favorite movies.
Yeah, that dude's hot.
Yeah. But yeah, you have been a constant in my life and in my recovery. And I could not have, I don't know that I'd be here without you, really. I could not have gone through what I've gone through without the love and support and acceptance from you.
Yeah, so there's that moment, right, where you make a decision that despite everything inside of you, you're going to have the courage to go and approach someone, especially when you have, and I had so much sense of rejection inside of
Yeah.
myself, and I was
Yeah.
being really authentic, and I was
Yeah.
really showing you who I was. And, that's why I just treasure that experience. It was like so important to me, and then I feel so lucky that I got to meet you. And there was years, I think, where we talked on the phone almost every single day, and just we would call and just check in, like, how are you doing today? What's your plan? I forgot about this, but it's like literally every day. It wouldn't necessarily be long. We would just have this check-in where we talked about our day, or what we were hoping to accomplish, or what we were feeling, or what was getting in the way of us moving forward. And I just remember so many points like that where, we either had breakthroughs or went through great difficulty and really supported each other.
Yeah.
It's been an amazing friendship. I'm so thankful.
I am too. And our friendship has helped me believe in myself for sure, and that I can trust. And you're probably the first person that I learned that I could trust. And we also worked out together.
Yeah, like several times a week we
Yeah,
would meet at the
that
Y,
was
which is probably another important piece of recovery.
Yeah,
It's like
the
take
way-
care of your body.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
And I had so much admiration for you about how you did that and what you went through to be able to do that.
Also, I remember you really hadn't done that before, and it was like you made a commitment to do something that was completely different than what you had grown up with. You showed up at that gym 3 days a week, and we would work out together. And so I saw that as transformative for you too. You know, that was kind of already a habit ingrained in me, but you took that on, and it's never stopped.
Nope.
And that's a hard thing to take on. Many, many people just never get there where they start to take care of their bodies as well as their mind and heart. Yeah, I totally remember that.
Yeah. Another thing I want to say is I think that our connection, and especially in that first time that we met each other and saw each other, was our sweet little girls, you know, like just precious, like not fucked up yet little girls. Just like I just felt instantly safe with you, and like
honestly, Dee Dee, you taught me how to play. I didn't know how. You know, you taught me how to laugh and joke, and I mean, really, I remember that. I just was like, oh my gosh, well, that's interesting. I didn't know how to do that. And you had this playful spirit about you that I just loved. Yeah, so that's something I got from you, is just that beginning of, you know, learning how to feel joy with another person. Yeah, cool. So many things. Yeah. So at some point you decided that you also wanted to be a healer. I was in my master's program at it was called Leadership Institute of Seattle, and you were a massage therapist and knew probably long term that wasn't the career that was going to work for you, and you know, with your body, and you know, it was hard on you. What made you decide that you wanted to go into the field of psychotherapy?
Well, a couple of things. One is the sister that we did the intervention with didn't end up staying in recovery, and she had a child, and my sister's addiction affected, obviously, my niece greatly as a little girl. And when she was 5, she started therapy, and I was a part of her therapy process. And that's the first thing where I just thought, I felt such inspiration and awe of watching her be able to process and get support, and it seemed so hopeful that she could have it grow up differently than the way I grew up, so isolated and alone and in pain. And I knew she was in pain, but that she didn't have to do it by herself.
Right.
And the other thing was watching you go through your master's program, and also having heard about when you were in the fire department and the way that you were able to be present with people that were in so much pain, and like just be with them. And then seeing the Leadership Institute program was very much centered on looking at your own family of origin issues and addressing those so that they are not what's leading the process of becoming a therapist, which was very important for me because of my caretaking stuff. And that program continually offered ways to address that. And it was a huge part of my recovery for myself and with my family. And but so you were an inspiration around that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, the Leadership Institute of Seattle was really different than most therapeutic programs. It really focused on helping you know yourself, develop that, you know, authentic self, and then how to express that in with ourselves, but also in the therapeutic modality. So it was not as didactic as some of the other programs, but the focus, I think, actually made us better therapists.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's one experience I had with a teacher there, and we were in a family group, and he, in front of my family group, asked me, or told me that he noticed that I wanted people to feel sorry for me all the time. And it was one of those things like what I described with my sponsor telling me, yeah, go ahead and go use again. Try it. When he said that to me, again, hurtful, angry with him, but it was a huge gift because I did. I wanted to be the victim, and everybody should feel bad for me. And that was such an important revelation because I, again, made another choice. That's not the way I want to present. I can be empowered and not be a victim, and have accountability. Like, you know, it was a step up into my level of being able to be accountable in my life, which was how I could have any power in my life. From that other position, I was never going to be able to fully heal. So,
You know, and this brings up another act of courage that I saw you have, which is that you literally brought your whole family to the Leos, and 2 professors did family therapy with the 4 of you or 5 of you, and the intensity of that experience, it was just amazing, and the honesty that everyone brought and the courage, I was just blown away. And you did that in front of the whole class. This was not something you did in like a little room like this. You brought your whole family, and you guys were totally honest about what happened, and it was just amazing to watch. But to do that in front of everybody, that took so much courage, and I imagine that was a big part of your healing.
yeah. Oh, yeah. Again, it was scary and way more of a gift than I could have ever imagined. I knew it was going to be good for us and me, and we did it again in front of a professional workshop setting, and then continued to do it privately with the therapist. And there's so much wreckage and damage generationally, and it really helped to address some of that. And you know, we still have struggles in our family, addictions and old patterns that are not helpful, but we certainly got a lot of tools, and we have came a long way. So yeah, it was great.
Yeah, that was another thrust of that program, was just the multi-generational trauma and how it just keeps getting passed on until really someone in the family stops and pauses and recognizes it and starts to process all that trauma. And that is a really challenging thing to do. I remember one of the professors talking about multi-generational trauma as like a freight train going down the tracks, and you're just trying to turn the tracks just a little bit to the right, so it isn't like another generation that has to suffer the same traumas. And I think both of us have managed to turn the tracks enough that hopefully we have not passed that on to people. I mean, I think to some extent you can't help it, but you know, and created better lives for ourselves.
And our kids.
And our kids, yeah.
Yep.
So at this point, I really just interested if you have any more that you would want to share about this process for you, the recovery and healing, and maybe even the things that you're still working on in your healing.
Sure. Recovery from my drug and alcohol addiction was just the very beginning and the very tip of the iceberg. Right. But without that, I couldn't have done anything else. And so I said part of my service work was being a treasurer of a meeting in my home group,
Right.
early in recovery. And I ended up stealing the money that I was entrusted to
Wow.
take care of. And that was, I, in my mind, borrowed it. I needed it. And ended up having to tell that to my home group, first to my sponsor, and then to my home group, and make amends for that using the tools of the 12 steps. Those kinds of experiences where I sabotage myself, or the ways that I cope that were so unhealthy would show up in my recovery, giving me the opportunity to grow and heal if I wanted to, or run away, which I did not. I would, and I think that's like, for me, grace from God that I was able to keep making that choice to live and not run away or die. Wow. And in my recovery at 6 or 7 years, I actually went to, admitted myself into a psychiatric ward of a hospital because I was struggling. It was after a relationship breakup and being at that deep place of pain of rejection and abandonment, re-experiencing that and not being able to function. And I asked my mom again for help, and she showed up again, and I spent 5 days in the hospital. And for me, that is a proud moment because I chose to get help and ask to live.
Yeah.
And not, fuck it and go have a drink or a drug. Right. And that's, again, that grace. And that's been with me through my recovery. And my relationship with a higher power has been the biggest tool because I've, in the process, recovered that I wanted so much as a little girl. And now I've got to have that. I got to choose what that looked like and have God be there for me instead of trying to be good enough for God.
Wow, that's so inspiring. I'm so touched by your courage. I can't imagine how hard that must have been to be the treasurer and then actually steal the money and then go and repair that. Unbelievable. And then your courage when you were literally having a breakdown to tell your mom, I can't keep going. That's like the opposite of what you were supposed to do, which is always keep going and always take care of other people. And you allowed yourself to really collapse and finally be taken care of in a way you needed to. I mean, there's story after story like that about you, Dee Dee, and I don't know anyone that has worked as hard as you have to become a healthy person, and you amaze me all the time.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I so appreciate you coming here today and sharing your story. I'm so touched and thankful that you were willing to do that, and I'm so thankful that you're my friend.
I feel very thankful for you too.
Yeah.
I love you.
I love you too.